Think you know who Paimon is just because you saw him in a horror film or skimmed a page from the Lemegeton? I hate to break it to you, but what you've seen is only the tip of something much deeper and far older. The truth is, the version of Paimon most people know is closer to a pop culture caricature than a true spiritual entity. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Paimon might not be a demon at all, but a distorted echo of a forgotten god, buried under centuries of religious repackaging and occult censorship. Sounds outrageous? Just wait. In this video, you're not getting surface-level summaries or recycled lore. We're diving into hidden texts, ancient cultures the forums never mention, and interpretations even seasoned occultists avoid, because they challenge everything we've been told. And the best part, you don't need to be an expert to follow along. I'll guide you through each layer of this mystery, with your feet on the ground and your curiosity wide open. This isn't fear-mongering, but it's not comfort either, because once you understand who or what Paimon might truly be, your entire view of spirituality, power, and even your own psyche might never be the same. And here's the kicker. He may have already shown up in your life, and you didn't even notice. The pre-Solomonic origins of Paimon, few imagine it, but Paimon's story doesn't begin with the Lemegeton. Long before his name was inscribed in the legendary grimoires, echoes of his presence could already be felt in ancient traditions now. Half buried in time, a wise voice would tell you that these kinds of entities don't just appear, they evolve, like myths wearing different masks across the centuries. In Mesopotamian lore, for example, certain minor gods were known to embody the same traits linked to Paimon: dominion over hidden knowledge, influence through sound, even kingly authority. Which begs the question, are we simply renaming old gods and calling them demons? Much of what we label occult today was once revered religion. When revisiting Sumerian hymns or Babylonian tablets, you'll often find familiar shadows with ancient names. Knowledge doesn't disappear, it disguises itself. And in those disguises, mysteries hide in plain sight. Imagine knowledge as a river, born from a forgotten spring, merging with streams from different lands until it reaches the ocean of modern belief. That's Paimon, an ancient current resurfacing under a new name. In early civilizations of the Fertile Crescent, you'll find spiritual beings closely linked to wisdom, sound, and royalty, attributes deeply tied to Paimon's mythos. And these were not feared figures. They were mediators, guides, even protectors. The villainization came later, courtesy of monotheistic reforms that rebranded ancient spirits as forces of evil. Scholars who dive into the Zohar or Enuma Elish quickly recognize the patterns. The characters change, the script remains the same. What we think of as unique revelations may actually be reruns of an older, deeper mythology. Different tongue, same tale, and sometimes all it takes is a closer listen to recognize the melody. Of course, some might ask, if Paimon didn't originate in the Lemegeton, why is he so central to it? That's a fair question, and the answer is simple yet profound. Grimoires like the Lemegeton were curators, not creators. They gathered names, ideas, and archetypes already circulating in earlier oral traditions and lesser-known manuscripts. Think of it like today's comic book universes. Thor, Hercules, and Gilgamesh all featured side by side, despite their vastly different origins. Paimon's presence in this collection speaks to his long-standing influence. For those curious, explore obscure texts like the Liber Officiorum Spirituum. You'll find similar names with details suggesting far older roots. In the occult, nothing appears out of thin air. Everything has a thread, often tangled but always traceable. Throughout history, humanity has always tried to translate the unseen into figures they could name and understand. Paimon is a textbook example of this instinct. Spirits of air, of Music of esoteric learning, they show up time and time again, usually cloaked in titles like king, master, or guide. What's uncanny is how civilizations continents apart crafted such similar portraits. It's almost as if there's a collective blueprint in the human psyche that paints these images with startling consistency. Jung might have called it an archetype, and he wouldn't be wrong. Whether you dive into Coptic Gospels, Hebrew mysticism, or ancient Vedic texts, you'll begin to recognize familiar contours. The names vary, but the roles repeat. They are the guardians of forbidden insight, tempting, terrifying, and oddly familiar. Scholars who truly delve into ancient grimoires often discover they're dealing with a jigsaw puzzle, pieces spread across cultures, languages, and centuries. And Paimon, in that sense, isn't just a demon or a king. He's a symbolic node in a vast network of myths, encoded in layers of story and symbolism. Think of it this way. In Egyptian theology, Thoth guarded the secrets of writing and divine knowledge. In Hindu lore, Saraswati does the same. These are not coincidences. It's as if every culture needed to invent, or perhaps remember, a figure who stood at the gateway of intellectual power. When Paimon emerges in medieval European texts, he's simply the newest mask on a very old face. And once you begin to recognize those masks, you'll never look at these entities the same way again. Even in the way Paimon is portrayed, riding a dromedary, surrounded by music and fanfare, there are hints of his ancient ancestry. Symbols like this aren't chosen at random. The camel suggests a desert origin, possibly tied to pre-Islamic jinn lore or North African spirits. The music points to ritualistic importance, not just flair, but invocation. Many ancient deities demanded music as a bridge between realms. Paimon's courtly procession might seem odd until you compare it to the processions of Dionysus or even the ecstatic rites of Sufi mystics. These aren't just spooky flourishes, they're echoes. What seems fantastical today was once sacred protocol, and to those who know how to read symbols, that makes all the difference in decoding the deeper truths. So why does all this matter? Because uncovering Paimon's pre-Solomonic roots forces us to rethink the labels we've accepted. It challenges the neat boxes of good and evil, demon and angel. When you understand that many so-called demonic figures were once revered, that their fall from grace was political, not spiritual, you begin to see how belief systems evolve not from truth, but from agenda. And once you realize that, the door opens to a much bigger exploration, not just of Paimon, but of how myth, power, and perception collide. The next layer, it's in how these grimoires conflict and sometimes harmonize with one another. Differences between grimoires. Some folks imagine that grimoires are like printed manuals, each page consistent and final, but that's far from the truth. In reality, they're more like ancient playlists curated by mystics from different eras, each with their own taste, goals, and sources. When you compare the Lemegeton to the Pseudo-Monarchia Daemonum, for example, you'll notice how the same spirit can show up under different names or with slightly altered attributes. Paimon, for instance, is a king in the Lemegeton, but doesn't even make the same kind of impact in other lists. Why? Because grimoires weren't written in isolation. They were influenced by geography, politics, and even personal belief systems. What a French magician believed might be heresy to an English one. And that's exactly where things get fascinating. It's not just what's written, but why and when it was written that tells the real story. These inconsistencies aren't flaws, they're breadcrumbs. Each version of a spirit like Paimon reveals a layer of what that entity meant to the people who recorded him. Think of it like folklore. Little Red Riding Hood has dozens of versions, and each one reflects the fears and morals of its time. Grimoires work the same way. A spirit's attributes might be enhanced or diminished depending on the cultural moment. In one manuscript, Paimon commands 30 legions. In another, it's 200. Is that a contradiction or an indication of evolving reverence? The wise won't be thrown off by these variations. They'll use them as a map. And once you learn to read these differences, each grimoire becomes less a rule book and more a mirror of mystical evolution. Let's talk tone. The Lemegeton, especially the Goetia, reads like a bureaucratic ledger, precise, structured, formal. It presents demons like functionaries, complete with ranks and duties. On the other hand, the pseudo-monarchia demonum feels more like a royal gossip column. It's colorful, dramatic, and sometimes downright opinionated. It's the difference between a military briefing and a tavern tale passed down in whispers. Both are valuable, but they serve different purposes. And here's a practical tip. If you're studying spirits, always compare at least two sources. Use the Lemegeton for structure and the pseudo-monarchia for character. When the same name shows up in both, like Paimon, you know you've found someone worth paying attention to. Another striking difference lies in how the spirits are invoked. Some grimoires rely heavily on divine names and angelic authority, almost as if the magician is borrowing holiness to keep the spirits in line. Others rely on geometry, planetary timing, or ritual objects. The Ars Tergia Goetia, for instance, is far more complex in structure than the Goetia alone, often demanding precise alignments and circles within circles. Paimon's name might appear in multiple texts, but the methods to summon or communicate with him vary wildly. What does that tell us? That the magician's worldview, whether rooted in fear, power, or piety, shapes the entire experience. The spirit is constant, the summoner is not. Some grimoires even contradict each other outright. In one, Paimon is benevolent, offering knowledge and loyalty to the skilled. In another, he's a deceiver, prone to twisting words and tempting the unprepared. So, which is it? Here's the deeper truth: both. Spirits, if real, likely reflect the energy and intention projected onto them. Like a mirror, they return what you bring. This is why two magicians can have radically different experiences with the same name. One finds wisdom, the other chaos. That duality, that unpredictability, is what makes occult study a personal journey, not a checklist. And that's why no single grimoire should be your only source of truth. If you ever want to get your hands dirty, try this. Pick a single spirit, like Paimon, and track his name across 3 different grimoires. Note what stays the same, what changes, and what's added or omitted. This is where patterns emerge. Perhaps one book emphasizes his voice and music, another his throne and followers, and a third his appetite for secrets. These aren't inconsistencies, they're layers. You're not just learning about a spirit, you're learning how humanity has interpreted him across generations. And that kind of insight, it's rare and powerful. It's also why digital databases like esotericarchives.com or printed compendiums like the Book of Spirits by Crowhurst are absolute goldmines for anyone serious about diving deeper. So what happens when modern interpretations join the mix? That's when things get even more interesting, and sometimes a little chaotic. Internet grimoires, social media, occultists, and modern fiction all start to blur the line between tradition and invention. You'll find versions of Paimon that never existed before 2000, complete with Instagram aesthetics and TikTok rituals. Does that dilute the original image or evolve it? The answer lies in the next piece of this puzzle: how modern media and culture reshape ancient spirits for today's world. Paimon in pop culture and his impact on modern demonology. It's almost funny how a name that once circulated in obscure manuscripts now pops up in horror movies, memes, and even cosplay conventions. Paimon, once whispered in Latin under candlelight, is now trending on Reddit threads and film analysis YouTube channels. That shift isn't accidental, it's cultural recycling. When Hereditary hit the screen in 2018, it launched Paimon straight into the pop culture bloodstream. Suddenly, People who never touched a grimoire were Googling his name, looking for sigils and wondering if they'd just summoned something by watching a movie. This rebranding turned an obscure spirit into a global icon of fear and curiosity. But here's the twist. Pop culture often simplifies or sensationalizes what's actually very nuanced. And that distortion? It changes how people relate to these ancient forces, even unintentionally. Now, this doesn't mean the modern Paimon is fake. It means he's been reinterpreted. Pop culture treats spirits like characters, and characters need clear roles: villain, guide, monster, anti-hero. So filmmakers, game designers, and authors pick aspects that will sell the story. Hereditary, for example, portrayed Paimon as a lurking demonic overlord, terrifying, manipulative, unstoppable. But when you go back to the original texts, you find something else. A king with knowledge of philosophy, science, and secrets of the mind. Not exactly the horror villain you'd expect. So what we're seeing is not a lie, but a creative lens. And for the modern magician or curious seeker, that lens is a double-edged sword. It can ignite interest or lead you down a cartoonish path. Video games have been especially active in reviving old demons with a fresh coat of pixels. Titles like Genshin Impact or Shin Megami Tensei reference Paimon, though sometimes the connection is loose, symbolic, or ironic. In Genshin, Paimon is a cute floating companion, more sidekick than sovereign. That contrast sparks a kind of philosophical amusement. How did we go from King of the West to flying anime gremlin? It says a lot about how names carry power, even if the form changes. For those paying attention, it also shows how easily meaning is reshaped when myth meets market. And in an age where spiritual identities get commodified, the wise will question, what have we gained or lost in translation? This popularity boom has also influenced real occult circles. You'd be surprised how many modern practitioners discovered Paimon through horror movies or Reddit. That curiosity leads them to dig deeper, often landing in communities that blur entertainment with genuine esotericism. Here's the catch. Not everyone is equipped to tell the difference. Some treat the Guetia like a fantasy role-playing guide. Others approach it with reverence, ritual, and research. But either way, pop culture has opened the gates. Spirits like Paimon, once hidden in niche corners, are now knocking on the mainstream. Whether that's a blessing or a curse depends on how you walk the path. The modern magician must now deal with expectation inflation. Thanks to movies, many people assume summoning Paimon means instant wealth, dramatic possessions, or cinematic hauntings. But traditional texts rarely promise such Hollywood fireworks. Paimon is said to offer knowledge, the kind that requires work, discipline, even sacrifice to integrate. That's a far cry from what viral TikTok rituals promise. So there's a risk here. When entertainment sets the bar, reality may disappoint, or worse, confuse. The wise approach with both caution and curiosity. They learn to separate symbol from spectacle, and in doing so, they discover a deeper power. One that's earned, not gifted in a jump scare. But let's not be too quick to dismiss the cultural revival as shallow. Sometimes myth needs a remix to survive. Pop culture can act like a portal, a way in. For every person scared by Hereditary, there's another who picked up a grimoire because of it. That spark, that curiosity, is powerful, and if nurtured, with research and reflection, it can evolve into a real spiritual path. What matters is what comes after the fear, the study, the understanding, the ethical engagement with these forces. Modern demonology is no longer the domain of candlelit chambers. It's on forums, podcasts, and playlists. The question is, will the seeker go beyond the surface? Because once you do go deeper, you start to ask questions that culture won't answer. What does Paimon really want? What is the cost of knowledge? Is he a reflection of our ego, our intellect, or something entirely other? And that leads us to a more profound level of study, one that merges spirit with psyche, one that makes you reconsider everything you thought you knew about angels, demons, and what lies in between. And that line of thought, it takes us directly to our next exploration, the inner meaning behind these spirits and how they might be less literal monsters and more symbolic mirrors of the human mind. Esoteric versus psychological interpretations. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when the question shifts from "what is this spirit?" to "what part of me sees this spirit?" That's the turning point, where the esoteric and the psychological begin to intertwine. In one camp, you have magicians who believe Paimon is a literal, independent entity, a king among spirits with will, awareness, and influence. In the other, you have those who argue that these spirits are inner archetypes, fragments of our subconscious mind dressed in the robes of mythology. The truth? It might be both. And that's where the real work begins, navigating between outer ritual and inner revelation. It's not about choosing one view over the other, but learning how to hold both perspectives in a single, steady hand. Esoterically speaking, Paimon is invoked as a king who reveals hidden knowledge, influences others, and teaches all manner of arcane arts. The rituals are specific, complex, and symbolically rich. Practitioners light candles, draw circles, pronounce ancient names, not just for show, but because they believe the ritual language opens an actual gateway. For them, Paimon is real, just as real as gravity, invisible but undeniably felt. This camp draws on tradition, lineage, and metaphysical lore. To them, working with spirits is like dialing into a cosmic frequency. If you do it right, the line is clear. Do it wrong and you're talking to static. There's a beauty in that precision, and a responsibility too. On the psychological side, the lens shifts. Here, Paimon isn't an external being, but a symbol, a mask worn by the unconscious to communicate deep truths. Psychologists like Jung would call him an archetype, representing intellect, persuasion, and command. Think about it. When you invoke Paimon, are you really summoning a spirit? Or are you activating your own latent abilities of focus, communication, and intuition? That's not a downgrade. It's a profound empowerment. The ritual becomes a language to speak with yourself. And in that process, shadows are integrated and inner power is reclaimed. Paimon, then, isn't outside you. He's a reflection of the king within. Now, let's not pretend this divide is clean-cut. Even the most grounded esotericist will admit that something changes in their own psyche during ritual, and even the most rational psychologist may have a moment where an inner voice feels external. The overlap is the sweet spot. It's in the moment when your body reacts before your brain catches up, when intuition flares like a sudden flame, when symbols dream themselves into your waking life. That's where the mystery breathes. Whether it's a spirit whispering or your soul stirring, the transformation is real. And perhaps that's the only metric that truly matters. Practical example. Let's say you're preparing to speak publicly, something terrifying for many. You could invoke Paimon in ritual, asking for eloquence and presence. Esoterically, you're calling on a king of speech. Psychologically, you're programming yourself to access confidence and clarity. Either way, the outcome aligns. Your voice strengthens, your words land, your presence expands. That's magic. Not in the Harry Potter sense, but in the practical, repeatable sense of cause and effect. So whether you wear a robe or do a quiet meditation, the path opens. The key is intent, focused, aligned, honest intent. Another thing to consider, belief has weight. In both interpretations, your mindset shapes the experience. If you believe Paimon is wise, he will speak through wisdom. If you fear him, fear will echo back. That's why experienced practitioners, no matter their philosophy, approach these forces internal or external, with respect. They don't mock, minimize, or pretend. They observe, engage, and refine. Over time, they build a relationship. Whether that relationship is with a spirit or a part of the psyche almost becomes secondary. What matters is the transformation it sparks. And transformation, as any true initiate will tell you, is the heart of the path. This blend of the mystical and the mental opens the door to a third interpretation, that spirits may be real and psychological at the same time, that our inner world might be the bridge to another. That invocation might work because mind and mystery are not separate things but reflections. And once you entertain that idea, something shifts in how you study spirits like Paimon. You begin to listen differently. You look for signs not just in rituals, but in dreams, emotions, and synchronicities, which naturally leads us into the next phase of exploration. How the voices of others, the community, the audience, the believers, help shape and reinforce the reality we experience. Controversial theories from fans, the internet has become the new grimoire, a place where countless voices, beliefs, and wild theories swirl together like incense smoke in a forgotten temple. And when it comes to Paimon, oh, the theories multiply. Fast. Scroll through any comment section of a video about him, and you'll find people claiming they've spoken to him, seen him, channeled him, or even become possessed by him. Some swear he gave them wealth. Others say he taught them music overnight. But the real intrigue lies not in whether these stories are true or false, but in why people are having such intense experiences. When enough people believe in something, really believe, it begins to shape reality in subtle and strange ways, and in that liminal space between fact and faith, the human imagination goes wild. One common theory is that Paimon isn't a demon at all, but a misunderstood ancient deity. Fans pull parallels from Phoenician, Mesopotamian, and even Egyptian sources to argue that Paimon was originally a god of knowledge and wind, later demonized by Christian scribes. Sounds far-fetched? Not so fast. History is full of deities turned, demons as power-shifted hands. Baal, once a thunder god, became a prince of hell. So is it really that wild to imagine Paimon had a similar fall from grace? And even if the theory can't be proven, it reveals something deeper. People are looking for a bigger story. They sense that the surface isn't the full truth, and they might be right. Another fan-favorite theory? That Paimon is actually not just one entity, but a title, a role filled by different intelligences over time, like how Pharaoh or Caesar wasn't one person, but a position of power. It's a fascinating idea. What if Paimon is a mantle, passed down between spirits or egregores that embody the qualities described in grimoires? This would explain why descriptions of him vary so much, or why different people report drastically different encounters. In practical terms, this also empowers the practitioner. Instead of chasing the true Paimon, they can interact with the current of Paimon, the archetype, the function. It's a shift from identity to energy, and that shift can change how you approach magic itself. Then there's the conspiracy corner, where things get spicy. Some theorists claim that certain elite groups, think shadowy societies or entertainment moguls, actively work with Paimon or embed his symbols into popular media. They point to sigils hidden in music videos, lyrics with double meanings, or characters clearly inspired by the King of the West. While many of these ideas are pure speculation, and sometimes pure nonsense, they do highlight a real phenomenon. Occult symbols are everywhere in modern media. Whether by accident, inspiration, or intention, the mystic is becoming mainstream. And when symbols circulate this freely, their meanings and their energies become accessible to more people, sometimes without them even realizing it. Let's Not forget the experiential theories, people who've interacted with Paimon and walked away with insights. One user claimed Paimon warned them not to chase wealth but mastery. Another said the spirit communicated only through music, cryptic chords that held personal truths. While skeptics may laugh, these stories often come from people who had no prior occult experience. That raises an interesting question. Are they projecting, or is something genuinely communicating through symbols and feelings? Either way, what matters is the impact. If someone changes their life, improves their mindset, or discovers purpose through a ritual or dream, does it really matter whether it was real? As the old saying goes, the proof is in the transformation. There's also a subset of fans who see Paimon not as a being, but a symbol of inner rebellion. To them, invoking Paimon is about reclaiming personal power, stepping outside societal expectations and declaring sovereignty over their own mind. This interpretation is especially common in younger audiences exploring spirituality outside religion. They're not summoning a demon, they're summoning courage, voice, and intellect. And if Paimon becomes a symbol for that inner fire, that's magic too, just in a different cloak. It shows how spirits evolve, not just through books, but through the people who engage with them. Each belief, each theory, each meme even, becomes part of the living mythology. Of course, all these theories, wild or wise, contribute to one bigger reality. Belief is creative. The way we imagine a spirit changes how we experience it. That's why two people can perform the same ritual and walk away with completely different results. One meets a teacher, the other a trickster. And that's the beauty of spiritual exploration. It's messy, it's subjective, and it's always evolving. These fan theories, when approached with curiosity instead of judgment, become like parables. They don't have to be correct to be useful. And sometimes, a single comment or dream can lead someone down a path that transforms their entire life, which leads us to the next move, where we distill all these voices, theories, and traditions into something sharp, powerful, and shareable. Shorts and reels, turning Paimon into viral wisdom in the digital agora of today, where attention is currency and a scroll is all it takes to be forgotten. Mastering short-form content isn't optional, it's essential. If the goal is impact, then shorts and reels are your sharpest tools. And when the topic é algo tão magnético quanto Paimon, é ouro puro. The key is understanding the rhythm of attention. In the first 2 seconds, you either hook or lose. So imagine opening with a phrase like, "What if I told you one of the kings of hell might actually be a misunderstood god?" Boom. Intrigue. Activated. This isn't about clickbait. It's about creating portals, bite-sized, visually engaging portals into deeper knowledge. Portals the algorithm wants to share. The beauty of shorts is that you don't need to cover everything. Just spark enough curiosity to make the viewer hungry. Take a single sentence from the long-form video. Paimon teaches music and philosophy. Now ask the audience, why would a demon care about music? Let the silence sit for half a second, then hit with a visual. Sigils, manuscripts, even film references. You don't need heavy production, just clarity and pacing. Text overlay helps, music builds tension, and your tone does the rest. Remember, the point isn't to explain everything. It's to plant a seed that drives them to your main video, your channel, your world. You can also build a series, Paimon Facts. They don't teach you in church, where each clip reveals one unexpected detail. One short could focus on his connection with wind and voice, another on his ancient roots before the grimoires, another showing how pop culture twists his image. Repetition becomes rhythm. People start to expect and recognize your format. This builds brand, and when paired with consistent visuals, maybe a dark-toned background, a recurring musical sting, or even your signature way of saying, "Let's talk about the occult." Suddenly, you're not just sharing content, you're building identity, want engagement. End with a question, always. Have you ever heard music in a dream after a ritual? Or would you ever dare summon a spirit? Just to learn. These aren't just throwaway lines. They're friction points that activate the algorithm and start conversation. People don't just watch shorts, they comment, debate, share, and that's where your channel stops being content and becomes community. Your audience becomes part of the mythos, and you become the storyteller who gave them permission to question everything. Also, don't underestimate humor. It's your secret weapon. Take a dry fact like Paimon is accompanied by a noisy host and twist it. So basically, if you summon Paimon, don't expect a quiet night. Love's lower resistance. They create space for belief and doubt to coexist. You're not preaching, you're guiding. And when people feel safe, they explore deeper, even with topics that would have scared them before. That's your power, making the mysterious approachable, making the dark curious, making the ancient relevant. Need content ideas. Repurpose from your main video. This one phrase from an ancient grimoire will blow your mind. Paimon isn't who Hollywood says he is. 3 signs. He's trying to contact you, and 1 warning you can't ignore. Each of these can be 15 to 30 seconds of focused insight, driven by clear delivery and visuals that pop. Film vertically. Use captions. Stay close to the camera. The more intimate, the vibe, the better. Think conversation, not lecture. Make the viewer feel like you're talking directly to them while they lie in bed at 3 a.m., scrolling through truths they were never supposed to find. Because once they feel that, they'll want more. They'll look for your longer videos. Leave comments, ask questions, and what happens next is bigger than any algorithm. You start building a following that thinks, that questions, that seeks. And that's how a reel becomes a ritual. Now that you've seen what lies beyond the veil, beyond the movies, beyond the grimoires, beyond the myth, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Are you going to let it fade like another cool video you watch late at night? Or are you going to explore it deeper? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people never question what they've been told. They just accept. But you made it to the end. That already puts you miles ahead of the average seeker. So, ask yourself, what if these spirits aren't just ancient names in dusty books, but keys? Keys to your own mind, your own power, your own forgotten potential. Are you ready to use them? Or are you still waiting for permission that you don't need? If this video cracked open something in you, even just a little, then don't. Stop here. Keep digging, keep questioning, keep watching, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay connected. Because the next videos, they go even deeper. And I promise you, what comes next will challenge everything you think. You know about the occult, reality, and yourself.